All right, students, this is our review for our test on functions and linear equations. So we're not going to waste any time. We're going to get started right away. Hopefully you've already done the problems. And now you're doing this to check them. If you have not done the problems, then please stop what you're doing, go back and do the problems, or pause the video as you go along and do them before I write out answers. Okay? Let's get started. So first of all, let's talk about the vocabulary you need to be familiar with. In this particular unit, there is quite a bit of vocabulary. It's a lot easier if you know your vocab. You need to know the definition of relations and functions, what makes a relation a function. Not all relations are functions, but all functions are definitely relations, and that's something to know. You have to be able to tell me domain is x and range is y, and you have to be able to tell me what they are. It's the set of all the x's, set of all the y's. You have to be able to determine independent and dependent variable in a circumstance. You have to know that rate of change is the same thing as slope with words behind it. That rate of change is slope with meaning. Slope and then with meaning, because it has the units like miles per hour or cars per hour or meters per second or dollars per day. I mean, there are all kinds of different ways you can write a rate of change depending on the circumstance. You have to know what makes a function linear. You have to know slope-intercept form, point-slope form, and standard form of a linear equation. And you need to be able to find x and y-intercepts. So this is just vocabulary. This is not all of the skills that are on the test, but this is just the vocab that goes along with this test. So we're going to start with functions. What is a function? Are these functions? Find the domain and range, and so on. I'm going to pause it and write out the work, so here it comes. All right. So you see here that we have a yes, a no, and a yes. So let's just go through it briefly. Yes, this is a function. I looked at all the x's. Noticed that none of them repeat. The list of x values in order from least to greatest is the domain. And then the range here, the list of y values from least to greatest. This one isn't. 0, 1, -1, 0. 0 and 0 are the same number. So this is not a function. You would go through list again, the domain and the range from least to greatest, going across with the curly braces around it. Notice the range has more than the domain in this one because this one was not a function. Okay, how about down here? Use the vertical line test. So you would draw yourself a vertical line, and I can see that this fails the vertical line test, whereas this other one over here passes the vertical line test. So this is a no, this is a yes. For the domain on this one, since this curve does not have any x values on it that are lower than 0, it's 0, x is greater than or equal to 0. Is the inequality for the domain. For the range, it will continue on indefinitely all the way up and all the way down, just widening out and going downward here. So we can say that the range is all real numbers. Every y value on the coordinate plane will eventually have a point that is on that curve. This one here, this one is a function, passes the vertical line test just fine. The domain is all the real numbers, but the range is only 1 and greater. So y is greater than or equal to 1 for the range. What about the domain and range of a linear function? Well, both include all the real numbers. When it's linear, all real numbers are included in the domain and the range. Next we have evaluating a function. Find the range for the given domain. Try it out. Pause your video, try it out if you haven't already. And here come the answers. Okay, here are the ranges for all three of these. Now, how did I do that? Well, the first thing we want to think about is how do I evaluate these functions? If I look at this first one, find f of x, or take each x, these are the x's because that's domain, and find f of that number. And that purely means replace the x in the expression with that number, do the math, and there's your answer. And you can see that -11 right up here. Let's do a different one. Let's do this bottom one. How about f of -1/2? Well, that's 8 times -1/2 minus 3. It's whatever the function is that they give us. So -1/2 of 8, -4, minus 3, -7. You can see that here. So to evaluate a function, you're just going to plug in the number or numbers that you get for x to find the value of the function, the f of x, or the range value. And also, you can also think about that as the y, because it is the same thing. F of x and y are interchangeable. Continuing on with slope. In each case, find the slope or the rate of change. Pause it and try them yourself if you haven't already. Here come your answers. Okay, let's go through these. So we have just regular finding slope right up here. Y minus y over x minus x. I chose to go first point to second point. I get 1 over -1, so you should have a -1 slope for that. Sorry for any noise pollution there in the video. I kicked the table by accident. On this one, y minus y, 2 minus -2, which is 2 plus 2, which is 4. -3 minus -3, which is 0. So that one's undefined. You can notice by the identical x values in the point. Right here, oh, I forgot to do this one. Okay, we'll do it now. So right here we have a rise and run question. Rise, run, ratio here. This ratio is 3/1. It's positive. Ratio, simplify. Nope, can't simplify. There's my slope. M equals 3. And then we have over here. Now, if you're given an equation, do not assume that the number you see the way it's written is your slope. Your slope in this case is -3. So if you notice that on this problem, excellent. If not, take the time to rewrite it. Y equals mx plus b. Just make sure you didn't put 3x minus 7. That's not the same thing as 7 minus 3x. On this one, to solve for y, I had to do a few more steps. Once I solved for y, there's my slope, 3/2 right there. On this one, we're finding a rate of change, x and then y, because the number of pencils and the cost are the input and output. So the input is the number of pencils, and the cost, that's the output. So the independent variable x and the dependent variable y. The cost of the pencil depends on the number of pencils. So I took, in each case, I found y minus y over x minus x, and in each case it comes out to be 1/4, or 0.25. So we can think about this one in a couple different ways. We can say that it's 1/4, but what would make better sense here would be to say it with money, 25 cents per pencil, because a rate of change should have the word per in it. Moving on. Here's another skill we need to work on. This is finding the missing coordinate. You're given 2 ordered pairs, but one of the coordinates is missing. So in order to do that, I want you to set up an equation using your slope formula. So let's take my 2 ordered pairs here, and let's make it -4 minus -2, using them in this order, and then r minus 5 on the bottom, and it's equal to -2/3. Okay, -4 minus -2 is -4 plus 2 is -2. Then we have over r minus 5 equals -2/3. Now here's what we need to do. We're going to take that negative sign and put it up on the 2. And then we're going to treat this like it is a proportion. So we're going to cross multiply, and that's a skill you guys haven't thought about since pre-algebra. When you cross multiply with a proportion, what happens is you set those products equal to each other. So this cross product is -2 times 3, which is -6, and that goes on one side. And this cross product right here is -2 times r minus 5, and that goes on the other side. You can then distribute. -2r plus 10 equals -6. You can then subtract 10 from each side. That means -2r equals -16, and r equals 8. If you had a different way to do it, make sure you show that off to me in class. Next section. All right, now we're working on actually writing equations of lines. So let me pause it and write out the work here. You're finding the equation of the line given 2 points, the equation of the line given a point and the slope, and the equation of the line given a graph. So let me write it out and we'll go over it. Here it comes. Okay, so in this problem where it asks me to find the equation of the line, the first thing I have to do with my 2 points is find the slope. I wasn't given the slope to begin with. I had to find that slope, but having 2 points, that's the easiest way to find slope anyway. So once I have the slope, I can plug in the slope and a point into my friend point-slope form. Then I can solve for y, and I have my equation. On the second one, I already had the slope. So I could very easily go through and plug in point-slope form, plug in the values I have to point-slope form. Notice y minus -7 is y plus 7, and x minus -2 is x plus 2. Plug in the numbers. Don't be daunted by fractions. They're not that difficult. Your graphing calculator can help you a little with that. And this is the correct answer for the second one. For this third one, you have rise and run. So you have rise and run, 2/3, and a y-intercept of +1. The only thing I have not done in here is I have not found the x and the y-intercepts. Now the y-intercept was easy for this one. It just pops right up. It's right there. So my y-intercept is 1. But if I wanted to find the x-intercept for this equation, in order to do that, I'm going to plug in a 0 for y. So let's do that real quick. So now I have to solve this equation. Well, I'm going to subtract 1. So negative 1 equals 2/3 x. And then I'm going to multiply both sides by 3/2. And I'm going to get negative 3/2 equals x. And there's my x-intercept. So to find intercepts, remember to plug in 0. For the opposite coordinate, plug in 0. Okay, horizontal and vertical lines. And we have a little goofy acronym to help us remember this. It's HOI-VUX. Let's remember what it means. A horizontal line has a 0 slope and has a y equals equation. A vertical line has an undefined slope, has an x equals equation. So to figure out which is which, let's go ahead and actually find the slope and then write the equations for these two lines. Go ahead and pause it and try it yourself. Here comes your answer. And there you have it. Our vertical line ended up being x equals negative 3. Our horizontal line ended up being y equals 1. So I found the slope. When I discovered this one was the undefined one, I remembered VUX, which means it's an x equals equation. And all I have to do at that point is find the x value in both the points and write the equation. X equals negative 3. For the vertical, I got the slope of 0. I know that's the same y value. It's y equals 1 because it's an a y equals equation. Y equals 1. Okay, last thing we have is one real world problem to talk about. Pause it, read it, try to answer it on your own. Excuse me for yawning. I'm very sleepy. But I'm going to pause it now and write out the work. All right, guys. You start a pet grooming service. You spend $30 on supplies. Plan to charge $5 to groom a pet. Write an equation to relate your profit, y, to the number of pets you groom, x. Now, 5 times x, because it's $5 each pet or per pet, and that is the slope or the rate of change, $5 per pet. And then minus 30. Now, why is it minus 30? Because those are costs. That's what you spent on supplies. So the second half of this question is graphing. Now, when we go to graph this, there's a few different options. You could make a table, and that is fine. And if you recognize how to make a table on the graphing calculator, that's fine too. You could use the slope and y-intercept. That's what I did, because this happens to be in slope-intercept form. Finally, you could solve for y, if it wasn't already, then use slope and y-intercept. So these are all the options. Let's look at what happened when I did the slope and the y-intercept. My y-intercept was negative 30, and the slope is 5. Now notice that I counted by 5s on my graph. Just to clarify, this is 5, 10, 15, and so on up. This is my negatives here. This is both negative 5 for the x here, and this is negative 5 for the y, so this is positive 5. The ratio of the slope is 5 over 1. So a slope of 5 over 1 is easy to graph even if it's marked off in counting by 5s, because as long as the ratio is still the same, it works. So I graphed a slope of a rise of 5 and a run of 1, but it was really a rise of 25 and a run of 5, because 25 over 5 is the same ratio as 5 over 1, and there's my graph. What are the x and the y-intercepts? Well, here our y-intercept. Our y-intercept is negative 30. And what's our x-intercept? Well, sadly enough, I'm not exactly sure what that is. So what we went over is if I want to find the x-intercept, that means I should probably plug in a 0 for y. So 0 equals 5x minus 30. I'm going to add 30. So I'm going to have 30 equals 5x. I'm going to divide by 5. The x-intercept comes out to be 6. All right, guys. Remember to sit down and practice, practice, practice. Use the time over your holiday break. I know it's not fun to do schoolwork, but give yourself a chance to do at least a little bit of practice. I will see you guys in class.